And good evening, and thank you all for coming this evening. The National Health Service is perhaps Britain's most popular institution. It's also one of those subjects about which it is hazardous to make any kind of public comment without a ready supply of tin hats. And as you know, I've always tried to steer well clear of any kind of controversy. And the same goes for my co-author, Isabel Oakeshott. But we both felt that it was time for a serious national discussion about the NHS. If this was true when we began work more than 3 years ago, it is even more so now as the service struggles with record waiting lists and critical staff shortages in the aftermath of the COVID pandemic. And for me, there's also a more personal reason why I have developed a keen interest in healthcare. And some of you will remember the launch of another one of my uncontroversial books in 2015, the one about the Prime Minister before last. And if you were present on that occasion, you will probably remember that I wasn't. And I was in the USA in intensive care, having fallen ill with what I thought was a bad case of food poisoning. I was eventually diagnosed with sepsis and emergency flown to the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio. An amazing institution, rated number 2 hospital in the United States, of which I was and remain a trustee. My life was in a balance, but after months of rehab and despite some setbacks, I made a full recovery. And you may well think it's all very well for me to talk about jetting off to my world-class clinic, but what about the rest of us? In which case, I agree with you. In fact, that is largely the point of this book. And the NHS was established to provide free health care for everyone in Britain at a time when medicine looked very different. Much of what can be achieved today could not even be imagined 70 years ago. At its best, the NHS can deliver the kind of treatment and care I was fortunate enough to receive in Cleveland, Ohio. But both within the health service and outside it, many will say that the NHS has too much to cope with simply keeping the show on the road. The care it provides every day ranges from outstanding to inadequate or worse. The majority of patients are very happy, or at least satisfied with their treatment, but a significant number are badly let down and wait far too long for their care. And the settings in which care is provided range from the state-of-the-art to the decidedly grim. Any honest look at the NHS will receive stunning examples of innovation, ingenuity, excellence, dedication, commitment, and kindness, but also sometimes of waste, indifference, and failure. And the problem is that any attempt to offer such an unvarnished view of the health service is inevitably seen in some quarters as an attack. I'm quite sure that is how some will describe this book, probably even without having read it. But those who dismiss legitimate criticism in this way are actually doing the NHS a disservice. And it's only through a real understanding of the true state of the NHS can we begin to answer the question of what needs to change to allow staff to deliver the consistently high standard of care they want to provide. And that is what this book is for. It isn't an attack or an attempt to undermine the NHS or those who work in it. Indeed, I spent a year campaigning, successfully as it turned out, for a rare collective award of the George Cross for the NHS and its staff. Nor is it an argument for an insurance model or for abandoning the principle that NHS services should remain free at the point of use, a position that would be politically impossible, even if I thought it a good idea, which I don't. Rather, the book is a rigorous study of the NHS as it really is today. It's based on detailed, on-the-ground research, hundreds of interviews with doctors, nurses, and other health professionals, as well as administrators, academics, politicians, and of course, patients and their families. And I'm pleased to say that it has been warmly endorsed by some of the most eminent leaders in the field. And the virtues and failings of the NHS that we describe in the book will come as no surprise to the voters, whose relationship with their health service is more nuanced than is sometimes understood. They will cheerfully stand on their doorstep and clap for carers, but that doesn't mean they're starry-eyed about its faults. They will sometimes say that the NHS is the best health service in the world, but that doesn't mean they're convinced it offers the best treatment and produces the best outcomes. And most know that when it comes to international comparisons of survival rates for cancer and other serious conditions, Britain is hardly in gold medal territory. When people say they believe the NHS is the best health service in the world, they usually mean they'd rather have the NHS than any other system that they can think of. And ask people to describe the NHS, and they'll probably talk of gallant frontline staff doing their best to serve patients in the face of grim conditions, political blunders, cack-handed management, inadequate resources, and overwhelming demand, and all the drawbacks that follow. Long waiting times for appointments and treatment, apparent disparities in the quality of service from one place to the next, and all the other complaints we're familiar with. But above all, they have what someone in our research called the psychic assurance that the NHS will be there for them, whatever their circumstances. This assurance is incredibly powerful and one of the things they most value about living in Britain. But it also helps explain why ideas for much needed reform are always met with suspicion and why change is so hard. But nobody who cares about the NHS and those who rely on it could doubt that change is needed. For the right change to be identified, we need to define where we are. That is what Isabel and I have aimed to do with this book. And I hope you'll buy it and read it, and I look forward to hearing what you think. And by the way, all authors' royalties will go to NHS charities. And it remains for me to thank Isabel, everyone who agreed to be interviewed or otherwise helped with the project. My publishers Bite Back, especially Bite Back, and it's only a coincidence that I own Bite Back. And as always, Angela Entwistle and her team, who have worked hard not only on this event, but on the launch of another of my uncontroversial books, which, as you know, or may have heard, is coming out in a few weeks' time. And it does seem to have caused something of a carry-on. And of course, thanks to all of you for coming. I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening. But as an aside, I'm sure everyone here is very preoccupied by the situation in Ukraine. It's a real honor to have with us here tonight Colonel Vitaly Kraskovsky from the Ministry of Defense in Ukraine. Some years ago, Colonel Vitaly took Isabel and I out to what was then the front line in Donetsk, in the Donbass, as part of our research for our book on the state of the British Armed Forces. It was an unforgettable experience to talk to the soldiers in the trenches of the front line of the Ukrainian military. And a little bit about Colonel Vitaly at the moment. Though he's in London, his father is also a veteran, and much to his worry, picked up a gun and went out to the forest for a couple of days to shoot Russians, but fortunately he's back. His sister and his 5-year-old nephew are still in Kyiv, and his sister wishes to remain there to fight. But his father and his mother are in a rural area. And Colonel Vitaly requested leave to go back to join the fight from London, but he was instructed that his presence in London at the moment with the British is better. Colonel Vitali, thank you so much for making time to come to this event at what is such an incredibly difficult time for you and your country. I know of that family in Kiev. Colonel, just come forward a little bit, so for those that would like to speak to you, recognize you. Do come forward just so that everyone can see if anybody wants to have a chat afterwards with you. And we wish you and the Ukrainian armed forces our very, very best at this time. Thank you very much indeed.